Good evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan, updating you now on a potential threat to Florida. It's still a long way off. However, it's something to bear in mind. We're going to wait until we get a lot more people on board here. On the Facebook page, we encourage you to send your questions in as well. We'll try to help answer those for you. But we're going to go over a scenario that has some potential for affecting our coast. Early next week. That's right, early next week. This thing has just kind of popped up. We are getting into the peak of hurricane season. Usually the first couple of weeks of September, they become very active. I know this season the projections have been for a very weak season, and it's been that way, but things are starting to change, and it looks like it could change fairly rapidly here for Florida residents. We are looking again at the possibility of something going on here. Now, I'm getting some cues from wait a few more minutes, okay. And we are looking at the possibility of something developing off the southeast coast of Florida. So we're going to get to the maps. We're going to show you what's going on, give you my idea of what may happen here for us here along the Sun Coast and the timing of the system as well. I know a lot of people over the past few weeks have been talking about some low pressure area in the Gulf of Mexico, which would stir the wave action up, and possibly the winds would be strong enough to blow this red tide out. And there is some theories that suggest that a storm in the Gulf would help out in that situation. Okay, we've got a lot of people on board right now. We are going to share it on my Facebook as well. So here we go, folks. Good evening. This is a tropical system that has some potential to have an impact on Florida. That's right. It has popped up on the European forecast model. And the European forecast model, by the way, is one of the most reliable models that we have right now as far as forecasting tropical systems specifically. And the European forecast model is suggesting that on Sunday, this Sunday at 9 p.m., a tropical low developing just to the southeast of Miami, near the Bahamas, in between Florida and the Bahamas there. It wouldn't be a very big system at this point if it were to follow this scheduled timing and intensity. But as I move the map into motion, I'll show you what it's expected to do. You can see on the yellow and red, that increases the rain on the back end side of this tropical low. Again, it would push across South Florida if it were to follow this path. It wouldn't be a very intense system for South Florida if it were to follow this path. Again, for us, we would see basically with this flow around it, offshore flow throughout the day on Sunday and Monday. So Sunday and Monday, we would have a good deal of flow coming in from the east and from the southeast. That would be good news as far as keeping that red tide and forcing it off into the Gulf. Now, this is Tuesday at actually Monday at midnight, Tuesday at midnight, the low pressure area right off the coast of Fort Myers and Port Charlotte. But these isobars are wrapping up a little stronger there, so there's a possibility it could be a tropical storm. This is one of the first forecast models of the European, so it's a long way out. This is obviously about 7 days out from now, so a lot can happen from there. But you'll notice what happens on Tuesday morning starts to intensify once it gets over the Gulf of Mexico, and I'll explain why that may be the case. But the European model is showing a fairly significant system heading toward Louisiana late next week. So we'll put the map into motion and show you again how those lines get closer and closer together. That indicates a stronger pressure gradient or a developing tropical system. And then as it gets on in through time, Wednesday and even into Thursday of next week, heading toward Louisiana. And that would be, in this case, a hurricane. Now, the intensity remains to be seen. The water temperatures are extremely warm throughout that region, and conditions in the upper level of the atmosphere are expected to become a little bit more conducive for development next week. Now, this is just one forecast model. The GFS isn't showing anything at this time in the same area. And the GFS is usually known for spinning up things a little bit earlier than it should, and sometimes it doesn't pan out. But that would be bad for New Orleans, obviously, but all the heavier rain in this situation would be on the east side and the north side. So at this point, from looking at this model, it wouldn't be that significant of a system, but I would not be surprised if it were to gain some strength. So here's the headlines. Heavy rain, if we were to see this system for the Sun Coast, would be a definite possibility on Tuesday of next week. Even Monday, we could start to see some of that rainfall. And then we would, the worst case scenario would be tropical storm force winds on the low end. So we wouldn't be dealing with a hurricane by any stretch. And it looks like it would be heading away on Wednesday. So it wouldn't be around long either. It would move fairly quickly off to the west, northwest toward Louisiana and the Gulf Coast region. Again, that remains to be seen. A lot can happen, as we learned with Irma last year. So get a look at these water temperatures. This has always scared me. I've talked about this on several of the newscasts. The water temperatures in the Gulf are extremely warm, 90 degrees in some cases, and the Gulf Loop current is out there in the central Gulf. So if the storm were to get in there and the upper level winds become more favorable for development, you could certainly have a rapidly developing system there. So we'll have to watch that closely as well. And this is, again, the forecast of the European model, which came out today. This is showing Sunday at 9 o'clock with a low pressure center there. In this case, more than likely it would be a tropical depression, defined as a tropical depression. On Sunday, as it moves across South Florida, it could become a tropical storm. It still doesn't have a lot of closed isobars, so at this point it wouldn't be a very weak system at that. But still, look at all the rain across Florida and along the Bahamas, the northern Bahamas, and then that continues on into Tuesday. So this would be midnight on Tuesday, and then this is Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. showing a lot of rainfall still for the Suncoast. That would create a lot of wave action. Once the storm gets by us to the west, if it were to do so, we'd start to see more onshore flow beginning, looks like Wednesday morning just after sunrise. And then the winds and waves should calm down for us if this does pan out. And I'm not saying that it is. Understand that this is a long way off still. It's just an indication. I always give a little bit more weight to the European forecast model than I do some of the other ones. And boy, at that point on Thursday, with some pretty tight packed isobars, you would have to say that that would be a hurricane at that point, hitting somewhere up into the Gulf Coast region. As I talked about earlier in this broadcast, we would have a little bit better chance of getting offshore flow throughout the day on Monday and Tuesday, which would benefit us as far as the red tide goes. Again, the red tide, there are indications and theories that say that if we get a storm in the Gulf, the wave action, the strong winds, especially offshore, would help disperse the red tide. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be going away, but it would lessen it as it would spread it out considerably. Now, the indications are that we would have a pretty strong east wind, at least 20 to 30 miles an hour throughout the day on Tuesday if this were to pan out, possibly low-end tropical storm force winds. It's a long way off. I just want to give you kind of a heads up on this because I know a lot of us will be going out of town for Labor Day weekend, and a lot of people will be heading on vacation and may not be near a television and monitoring the system. We would advise you to stay very much alert to our mysuncoast.com as well as our First Alert weather app. You want to download that now. It's for free. You can track storms with your First Alert weather app. You don't need to be near a TV, so if you're going to be vacationing, you're going to be taking those 3 days off, and you're going to be on the beach, all you do is look at your phone, look at your app, and it will show if anything's developing. And certainly we here at the station will be giving updates on that as well. I just put one out, a 30-second update on this potential for a tropical system in Florida for Labor Day weekend. So that would be a heck of a news story, obviously, for red tide, 1, and 2, for the potential for some heavy rainfall here. Now, before this storm arrives, we're going to continue to see afternoon and evening storms that will bring up to 2 inches of rainfall like we saw today in parts of the Suncoast. The ground's going to be very saturated if this were to pan out. And so additional rainfall would cause some flooding concerns. I think that would be the biggest issue with this storm for us, would be the potential for some flooding, much concern about flooding here along the Suncoast than wind damage, as the case may be. But it all remains to be seen. This is the first basically run of this system from the European forecast model showing a tropical low or disturbance, if you will, developing east and southeast of the state of Florida on Sunday and then moving across the state on Monday and Tuesday. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, obviously leave them in this below on the Facebook. We'll try to answer those for you. We'll have a complete update tonight at 11 o'clock as well, with all of the election results as well on ABC7 at 11. So stay tuned, folks. It's not definite yet, but I just wanted to bring you up to speed with the latest forecast from the European forecast model. Thanks for joining me.